Yeah, I don't know what happened to the original space. Twitter's been acting up a lot, so I had to make a new one, unfortunately. So the original space I sent out, I don't think people are going to see this one. Let me see do the photos. So the app is acting up. Choose like it wouldn't let me start the space that I sent out. So all those people who saw this, who got the invite, they're not going to see this one.
I'm gonna send it out right now.
Appreciate you, man. That's ass. Hey y'all, I'm gonna work on getting the PDF. And so I don't know the previous space. Twitter's acting up a lot. So it wouldn't let me open it. It just closed it. So I don't think the people that I DM'd this the other space to, they might not see this one. But I'm gonna put the PDF in the Jumbotron and the thread. So just give me like a couple seconds.
I got it. I got it.
Oh, appreciate. Let me pull up this where we're at on my side real quick. So there is a part of this book that I skipped like maybe 2 or 3 pages where he cites Cruz, who makes these arguments that like the Jews funded the civil rights and that's why it didn't work and a lot of anti-Semitic shit. And yes, we can go through it and debunk it, but I just feel like it would be irresponsible to do so now. I'm just gonna give y'all a warning about those pages that I skipped. It's like maybe page 175 or something like that. But yeah, nah, I'm skipping that shit because the fuck, we got enough shit to shift through in this book that it's so unnecessary too. It's not even really constructive in any way whatsoever. So why the author included that in that book, I don't know. He doesn't even really break it down or give an analysis on it or anything. He just plops it in there and then that's it. And it's for like 3 pages. So I'm just gonna start on, let me see. Okay. I'll start right here. So I'm still in the chapter for Black Power and Bourgeois Black Nationalism. And on the PDF, I'm on page 174. So America thinks and acts as if it were a nation of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants because it is precisely this group which controls the cultural apparatus, mass media, performing arts, etc. of the con of the country, and therefore it is in position to control ideas and value. Hence, for American society, the most crucial requirement at this point is a complete democratization of the national cultural ethos. This requires a thorough democratic overhauling of the social functions of the entire American cultural apparatus. First of all, for whom and in whose interest does the cultural apparatus exist in America? Does it exist for the social needs, the social edification, the spiritual upliftment, the cultural development, solvency, and moral of all the diverse minority groups in America? Or does it exist solely and disproportionately for the social supremacy, the group narcissism, and the idealization of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant minority? This struggle for cultural democracy, the Cultural Revolution, thus becomes absolutely essential in order to expose and finally effectively deal with the group reality of American life. The Cultural Revolution also flows from another premise held by Cruz. Following C. Wright Mills, Cruz believes that it is the intellectuals who are the real agents of historical change, particularly in underdeveloped societies because the intellectuals, like certain parts of the proletariat, are actually aware of national oppression. But the intellectuals are conscious of the dynamic of social change also, and in some instances are able to apply this knowledge to their concrete situation. Hence, it is left to the revolutionary intellectuals to motivate and guide the masses. This guidance must take place in the cultural field at least initially because it is here that the intellectual, like the arts, operates. So this is Cruz's takes that Robert Allen is quoting right now, just so y'all know. The special function of the Negro intellectual is a cultural one. He should take the rostrum and assail the stupefying blight of the commercially deprived white middle class who has poisoned the structural roots of the American ethos and transformed the American people into a nation of intellectual dolts. He should explain the economic and institutional causes of this American cultural depravity He should tell Black America how and why Negroes are trapped in this cultural degeneracy and how it has dehumanized their essential identity, squeezed the lifeblood of their inherited culture ingredients out of them, and then regulated them to the cultural slums. They should tell this brainwashed white America, this nation of sheep, this overfed, overdeveloped, overprivileged, but culturally pauperized federation of unassimilated European remnants that their days of grace are numbered. And the cultural depravity that he's referring to is the basically what we see now is anti-intellectualism, like having discussions about books, but more importantly, like historical facts, taking initiative to have political education spaces, like those type conversations are oftentimes jeered at and rejected and outright persecuted and repressed. And again, we see that also with the assault on schools' books right now, where they're banning books at just crazy rates all across the South, but nationwide, and why that's for and what that's for. And then also the incentive of being an anti-intellectual, like how that's propped up and rewarded in the system. The impassioned extoration is apparently supposed to prod Black intellectuals. So this part I'm about to read. So I finished Cruz's quote that Robert Allen referenced. Now this is Robert Allen talking and giving his analysis on Cruz's take on why a cultural revolution should take precedence over any other revolution, whether it be economic, social, or other. So this impassioned exhortation is apparently supposed to prod Black intellectuals out of their lethargy and force them to assume their responsibility as agents of social change, makers of the cultural revolution. The Negro movement is at an impasse precisely because it lacks a real functional core of intellectuals able to confront and deal perceptively with American realities on a level that social conditions demand. And I would also take it a step further that because under white supremacy capitalism, the way in which we view or deem someone an intellectual has also been co-opted and tainted. Like we don't call someone an intellectual unless they have a degree from one of these institutions that we've already named, like what purpose they serve empire. So oftentimes the intellectuals that I, work with and that I talk to and build and politic with, they're not someone who went to college. I'm not saying it can't be found there, but I'm saying we have to like really take back the way we use and define intellectualism? Like, is it someone who's memorized all these European books and white centric thought points? No, it's someone who actually can take and understand what's going on, and can we use their intelligence to gather strategy for liberation? Like, those are intellectuals that I prioritize and that I try to gravitate towards. Oftentimes when they put in front of us what an intellectual is, though, it's usually someone who rationalizes the violence of the state. Like who can sanitize it the best with word salad and co-opting points and turning them on their ears so that we are confused or either misled. Those are what the empire deems as intellectuals. But again, that's counter-revolutionary for what we're trying to do, which is liberate ourselves and each other. The impassioned exhortation is apparently supposed to, finally, Cruz asserts the need for cultural revolution in his analysis of American capitalism and its weaknesses. Writing in Liberator magazine in November 1963, Cruz says, "We American Negroes exist in essentially the same relationship to American capitalism as other colonies and semi-colonies have to Western capitalism as a whole. Yet, when other semi-colonials of the colored world rebel against political and economic subjugation of Western capitalism, it is for the aim of having the freedom to build up their own native industrial basis for themselves. But our American Negro rebellion derives from the fact that we exist side by side with the greatest industrial complex in the world has ever seen, but which we are not allowed to use democratically for ourselves. Hence, while the Negro rebellion emerges out of the same semi-colonial social conditions of others, it must have different objectives in order to be considered revolutionary. In other words, we must locate the weakest sector of the American capitalist free enterprise in quotes, front and strike there. But where is the weak front and the free enterprise armor? The sector is the cultural front, or better, it is the section of the American economic system that has to do with ownership and administration of the cultural communication in America, i.e. films, theater, radio, and television, music, performing, and publishing, popular entertainment booking, performing management, etc. In short, it is that sector devoted to the economics and aesthetics ideology involved in the cultural arts of America. If the Negro Rebellion is limited by a lack of original ideas to, in quotes, fit the world into a theoretic frame, then it is only in the cultural areas of American life that such new ideas can have any social meaning. What is meant here is that the only observable way in which the Negro Rebellion can become revolutionary in terms of American conditions is for the Negro movement to project the concept of cultural revolution in America. That's Cruz's take. So now this is Robert Allen's take on Cruz's take, his analysis of Cruz's take. Cruz does not explain in this article why he thinks the cultural sector is the weak link in American capitalism, nor does he say how the cultural revolution is to come about. In the crisis of the Negro intellectual, Cruz simply restates in altered form his assertion of the economic importance of the cultural apparatus. Mass cultural communications is a basic industry, as basic as oil, steel, and transportation in its own way, developing along with it, supporting it, and subservient to it. It is an organized network of functions that are creative, administrative, propagandist, educational, recreational, political, artistic, economic, and cultural. Only the blind cannot see that whoever controls the cultural apparatus, whatever class, power group, faction, or political combine, also controls the destiny of the United States and everything in it. The most serious flaw.
Break? You want a break pen?
Oh, yeah, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I got you. Um, that was very interesting because it's interesting to think that the cultural wing of capitalism is the weakest part. Because if anything, that shit is strong in a
Okay.
motherfucker. But the most serious flaw in Cruz's work is the failure to establish, by argument or evidence, his central thesis concerning the salience of cultural apparatus and the projected cultural revolution. Exactly. He evidences an unfortunate tendency to substitute rhetorical assertion for reasoned argument.
Hmm.
In the achievement of the American quote unquote democratic cultural pluralism is found the essence of Cruz's program for launching Black Revolution. This means decentralizing the ownership and administration of the cultural apparatus as a crucial step towards creating genuine democracy among America's diverse ethnic groups. This task is to be performed by the Black creative intellectuals, quote unquote, because Cruz contends in America, quote, there is now only one group of American creative intellectuals who have the motivation, or at least the potential, for democratizing American culture and forcing the return of the public arts to people. These are the new generation of Negro intellectuals, end quote. These creative intellectuals form a special class which includes writers, poets, playwrights, musicians, composers, conductors, directors, actors, critics, artists, etc. It is this class, usually socially and economically privileged, wake that up, to
Mm-hmm.
which Cruz assigns the function of leadership. That's
See, and
literally the
that's
point.
where I have a problem with Cruz's take because
Yeah.
to me he's just vying for the black people who fit into these. He wants them to be that black middle class to be uplifted and be included into the American's empire propagandist machine, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not liberation.
It's the Hotep talented tenth, essentially. Um,
As
that's
a
what
reformed Hotep, I'm offended.
I'm sorry. I thought you would understand me. I thought you would overstand me. Sorry about
Wow.
that. If Cruz's program was carried through, it would consequently exasperate already existing class divisions. We're literally talking about that class divisions and tensions in the Black community. This is something of a paradox since Cruz is also an advocate of democratization and equality.
Hmm.
Upon closer examination, however, it becomes clear that Cruz only espouses more democratic relations among various ethnic groups.
Hmm.
As for the internal structure of the Afro American ethnic group, his only criticism is that the old line leaders and the Black bourgeoisie have failed in the task of securing group equality for Black America. He sees in the intellectual class, especially young intellectuals, Blacks' only hope of getting beyond the impasse created by the failure of the civil rights movement. Cruz's elitism goes so far as the call for the creation of a new black middle class.
Hello.
Child.
Just
Not
said it.
the new blacks.
Just said it. Like it was so
Child.
obvious.
The new blacks.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently to be composed largely of black intelligentsia, y'all know that word,
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote, organized on the principle of cooperative economic ownership and technical administration. He believes that such an administrative class would, quote unquote, be more responsible to the community in social, political, and cultural affairs than middle class based on free enterprise and laissez faire economics. But okay, I'm just going to keep reading. This may or may not be true, but it is precisely the creation of a new, invigorated black bourgeoisie which is high on corporate America's agenda for the black colony. From the corporate standpoint, such a class would help to stabilize the ghettos and provide a subtle means of social control. It
Mm-hmm.
definitely would not be a revolutionary force. This is illustrative of one of Cruz's dilemmas. He devotes a thick book to tracing and explaining the failures of black intellectuals, yet he falls back upon the same class for black salvation. A
Mm-hmm.
new nationalist synthesis cannot be achieved, he contends, until the Negro intellectuals as a class are prepared to lead the way. But how is this possible when Cruz, following sociologist Milton M. Gordon, also maintains that the black intellectual is, quote, is the main socially detached from his own Negro ethnic world? Cruz answers that the hope lies in the young intellectuals who somehow are expected to first clear the way to cultural revolution by undertaking a critical assault on the methods and ideology of the old guard Negro intellectual elite. But that does not answer the class question.
See, that's the thing where we're at too, where
Mhm.
I like reading books like this because we're basically seeing so many parallels of the way people think today and approach like conversations about like liberation and revolution. And the
Mhm.
thing is, we're lacking like revolutionary imagination. Like how do
Mhm.
you come upon like, oh, we can get revolution by creating by mimicking the very system we're trying to tear down. Like we see white capitalism and what that does to us. Let's paint it black. What? That's not my bad. You want me to
No,
go ahead and
it's
talk over on
true.
this one? Huh?
No, I think it's true. And it just reminds me of like all the Jay-Z conversations and thinking that like the cultural workers are supposed to be political workers. Like that's not those two things are not the same. And just because you can rap or paint doesn't mean that you're an expert on social political relations. Like, and we shouldn't expect people to do those things. How are you going to tell them that, oh, the new generation is going to replace the old generation? Who are the new generation learning from? The older
Okay.
generation. So that's just very silly and illogical. But yeah, you could take the next one.
And yo, you made me think of something because yeah, that whole thing of like, oh, the young people got it. It's like how
Yo.
when they have no direction. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that young people cannot. They, of course, they are essential to the movement. But what I'm saying is that it just sounds like a handing off of responsibility. Like we haven't
To
done
an
our
oppressed
part
class, because
yet.
even as young people they are also more oppressed. So it's like they don't have freedom of movement, they don't even have, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like it just seems like passing the torch and knowing that you're not going to have to carry some weight by passing it on to younger people who have less movement than you, less agency than you, and less power than you.
Right. Exactly. And then it's like saying like, oh, I did my part by passing the torch. So you know what I mean? Like you didn't challenge the system no way in your life, but you saying like, oh, y'all got it now, youngins. It's like a way of you saying that I did my part. But then also too, like to speak about, young people as an oppressed class, right? You're talking about the same people that you had in your household that you tore their wings off and bent them and pressed them to conform to society. You're saying now you're going to pass them the torch after putting them through a restrictive household that we're all under white settler colonialism are taught to have. Like, oh, in the household, you got to make sure you discipline them first, because if you don't, the police will. Or like how we see people practice using police as form of discipline against their kids, or
Oh,
how people are publicly filming themselves beating on their kids. So
yo.
then after that, you send them to school, and in the school, they're taught that they need to raise their hand in order to use a bathroom, and they can be denied until no. In order to get a drink of water, they need to raise their hand to do that. All of these things in which again, you take away their power of decision, power of individuality. They can't even dress the way they want to dress. Everything has to be uniforms or, controlled. They can't do any kind of self-expression, no exploration of any kind of radical thought or thought outside the status quo. But yet that's supposed to be the designated group to set us free when we haven't prepared an environment of freedom and liberation. Like it just, yeah, it's missing so much. But again, his only interest is, you know, is advancing into a higher class status and upward mobility. So that's why he comes to this conclusion and think it's revolutionary.
Child.
My bad. I've been going, yo,
As you should. It gives, we have investigated ourselves and have found we did no wrongdoing.
there,
Yeah.
such a great summary. That right there. As in the case of all Black professionals, their middle class orientation creates an ambivalence which is extremely difficult to overcome. Are Black intellectuals somehow different? Cruz admits that the answer is no. Thus, middle class Negroes have rejected the basic art expressions of the Negro folk in music, dance, literature, and theater. And Negro creative intellectuals, if not already of middle class origins, adopt middle class values. Hence, Negro creative intellectuals as a stratum tend toward total acceptance of racial integrationist premises. Thus, while some individual Black intellectuals may free themselves of their background, Black intellectuals as a social stratum are identified with the Black middle class and its ambivalent attitudes. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Pled with them, though he may, plead with them, though he may. Cruz cannot change this class reality. Cruz speaks of structural changes in societal forms and cultural revolution, but the essence of his program can be reduced to a call for democratization of America's cultural apparatus. He wants genuine pluralism instituted in the cultural life of the country. Herein lies another weakness in his program for revolution. For American capitalism is quite willing to allow cultural democracy so long as that does not interfere with established power relations. Cruz is not unaware of this possibility. One of the keys to understanding the effectiveness of any tactic, idea, strategy, or trend in the Negro movement is to determine how well the American system can absorb it and thus negate its forces. To repeat, the American social system quite easily absorbs all foreign and even native radical doctrines and neutralizes them. The same applies to the doctrine of the Negro movement. In fact, it applies all the more, simply because this movement is more native than others and therefore more intimately connected to the inner American social dynamic. Apparently, Cruz thinks this dynamic does not apply to his program. But as a superficial level, the mass media have been democratized in quotes in the last 2 years, and Black people have made their debut on the American cultural stage. Blacks have become very visible on television and in mass circulation magazines. Of course, the roles that they play, e.g., in Julia, I Spy, The Mod Squad, and Mission Impossible, have nothing to do with cultural nationalism, but are rather the white culture establishment's effort to absorb Negro cultural protest. To say the least, this absorption is being carried out in a crude and implausible fashion. The Negro characters in these productions have not the faintest relation to the reality of Black life. One may ask if Black youngsters in this age are actually expected to identify with Black men who are cops or spies working for whites and Black women who are incredibly bourgeois as to hardly identifiable as Blacks. The answer is yes. The media are not trying to project a picture of Black life as it is, but rather they are telling Black TV viewers how they are expected to act if they want to make it in white America. Television thus plays the role of a socializing mechanism, probably second only to public schools, devoted to inculcating Blacks with white middle class values. So fucking true. Like, how many times have we seen Black TV shows and we're like, this is just like, a white show with Black people acting it. Like, it's not even relatable. But again, it's not supposed to be. That's my problem with this representation. Not that representation. Now I'm gonna be real. I have a problem with representation in empire because if we understand the media as a force for a propaganda tool to assimilate people into its fucking sadistic, white settler, colonial, capitalist nature, then I don't want Black faces to help with that propaganda because that's gonna usher more of my people into an already, fucking all-encompassing machine that just permeates every aspect of our lives. Like, to me, if we wanted to see Black media and Black as in like revolutionary or liberatory or really creative, I would rather see more of like impromptu shit. Like, yo, we had this thing, right? Where you could sign up and get text messages and there would be pop-up plays. So you basically they would go to like alleys or parks and literally set up right quick and there would be plays put on. And in these plays, there had to be a point to them. It wasn't about just showing just like either black anguish or pain or the Cosby show type of shit. It would address real issues so that the viewer can walk away and apply those lessons learned to like how they deal with family or relationship or someone who is being targeted who's marginalized or the way in which they engage marginalized communities. Like the stories and the plays would do that. I would like to see more of that. Just like how people say I want to see people be like, I want to hear radical music in the mainstream. No, I do not. Because that shows me the mainstream has co-opted and swallowed it whole and is going to use it to pacify us and give us messages of black capitalism with a few drums in it. I don't want that shit. I would rather find a hole in the wall where some unnamed artist is there talking about some real revolutionary shit and can't get on radios because of how radical and how challenging it is. And that we get together and create systems, alternative systems of how we consume music and what music we consume and how it's put out there. That creates culture and that creates a radical underground culture that is more useful to me. But again, my bad. Let me keep going. Um, just let's see.
Sure you repost the space because we stay here and people have these conversations about how black people will get free if we just improved our culture, if we didn't have baby mama culture, we had dads in the home. Like baby, like we just gotta learn our history because we already been there, done that. We know that aspiring to middle class values is not gonna get us free. So please share the space because we could save a lot of time just looking at this
Okay.
and just reading things, not having the same conversation over and over again. Sorry, babe.
No, no, for real. No, that was right on point. Thank you. Let's see. Uh, if I reread something, my bad, y'all. I think I lost my place. Oh, okay, here we go. Television thus plays a role in socializing. Okay. News media have increasingly dropped the term Negro in favor of the cultural nationalist black. Even the U.S. Treasury Department, after a quick survey to see which way the wind was blowing, announced it would start using the term Afro American in its press releases. Concomitantly, sorry, I don't know that word either, y'all. Blacks are appearing more frequently in non-racial quote unquote roles in television commercials and in magazine advertising. But here's my problem with that. It's because movies are already heavily like misogynistic and just toxic all around. Some of the worst tropes I've ever fucking seen. And to see black people then carry out those worst, horrible tropes, like that to me is not progress. That's not something I want to cheer for. But anyway. The news media have increasingly dropped. Okay. One of the most successful efforts to absorb Black cultural nationalism into otherwise totally white oriented television programming was last summer's 7-part CBS news special on Black America. The series ranged over Black history, music, Africa, Black soldiers, and a few minutes were even given over to a discussion of separatism.
You want to?
Only, yeah, after this sentence, you want to take
Okay.
over?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. A few minutes were even given over to a discussion of separatism, only to come up with statistics purporting to show that most blacks don't like the idea.
I'm screaming. He just slid that last part in there. But this series was particularly interesting because despite its official tone of sympathy for blacks, it revealed once again the deep gulf which exists between the attitudes of the average blacks and those of average whites. Where blacks want to talk about quote unquote race relations in terms of discrimination or racism, to whites, the same phrase conjures up images of riots and destruction. Well, I wonder why. Ooh, baby, they be telling on themselves. I love people telling themselves. The quote unquote Black America series largely steered clear of any serious discussion of the views of quote unquote extremists like Stokely Carmichael and Rat Brown. It sought instead to legitimize the ideas of more moderate advocates of Black pride, such as Core's Floyd McKissick and Congressman John Conyers of Detroit. More sophisticated media people, however, are dissatisfied with this failure to grapple with Black militants. Jack Gould, television critic of the New York Times, criticized television's new constructive therapy efforts on the grounds that there is a veritable?
I think so. Yeah, you're right.
Censorship ban on Black militants. Gould was concerned with reaching and pacifying militant Black youngsters. Quote, the very persons who do not hesitate to go on the streets and spearhead the disturbances that concern the nation as a whole. Child, they are so scared of us, and they should be.
Mm-hmm.
He argued that it was insufficient to merely afford added comfort and reassurance to the parents of young Blacks by airing the worn opinions of supposedly respected Negro leaders. What was really needed, Gould stressed, was for Black youths to see Stokely Carmichael, for example, intellectually demolished on the television screen. Carmichael's pat phrases, he said, could be taken care of in relatively short order. This should be followed by a mature expose of Carmichael's political thinking, his aims for what he says should be a better America, and how he proposes to go about winning them, and the influence of the recent jaunt on his philosophy. I always think it's so interesting that when people combat revolutionary thinking, they always use that word mature, which like also
Mm-hmm.
speaks to what we're talking about in terms of youth oppression. Like
Mm-hmm.
even intellectual labor that is not, status quo is regulated to an oppressed class like children.
Mm-hmm.
Gould Gould was clever enough to know that no white man could successfully destroy Carmichael in the minds of young Black rebels. Wake it up. He therefore suggested that this dirty little task be assigned to Mrs. Martin Luther King, with entertainer Harry Belafonte acting as referee. This shit is rude. This
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote absorbing confrontation between the outstanding advocates of nonviolence and violence would then be beamed coast to coast for all potential rioters to see whose political blood was spilled. Interesting. So, progress is for a cultural revolution. So, progress is the cultural, quote unquote, cultural revolution. Of course, asinine television programs and insidious proposals by white television critics are unacceptable to Cruz. Cruz saw a basic change in ownership and administration of the cultural apparatus, not simply a facial uplift. But it cannot be denied that by adding a few Black faces on television, the medium which probably has the greatest impact on the Black population, the white cultural rulers have taken a major step towards co opting, distorting, and eventually nullifying Cruz's program. And this because Cruz's program could be reduced to the demand for an extension of democracy into the cultural field. American capitalism has demonstrated that it is quite capable of extending democracy into almost any field, cultural or political, without altering its fundamental structure or existing power relationships. But unless the latter are changed, quote, ethnic group democratization becomes merely another meaningless shibboleth, like racial integration, and it does little to help the Black community as a whole. Let's wake
Oh,
that up.
baby, real quick, right?
Hmm.
So when you were talking about, regulating the revolution to just the young people, you woke something up in me where, like, one of the faults I see with that too is that, so how he describes and say, oh, they try to paint this label of immaturity onto people who are revolutionary thinkers and minded, right? But the thing is if we only say like, okay, this is a young people thing, and then absolve ourselves as older people of our part in revolution and how we have to keep it going, it's not sustainable. Because then what happens? Once you hit 25, you're no longer supposed to be revolutionary minded. You just assimilate and what become a professor, become some kind of academic, some author, someone who just goes around and gets funds, creates a 501c3, and business carries on as usual, and there's no real change and no real revolutionary action. We need to talk about more. When we talk about revolution, to break down how not only everyone has a role in it, but what does it look like after 30? Like I come around a lot of comrades who struggle with that. Like what does revolution look like? What are my responsibilities in changing the world? Like what does that look like? And how does that change in my 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, right? A lot of times we discard our elders too, right after 60, that or shit, sometimes after 50, we're like, you're done. You're only here to tell us stories, but there's more to that. And I would like to explore that one day in a space, but you just made me think of that. I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, it's important. And we love your commentary. Please, girl. Anyways, um, the political and economic programs proposed by cultural nationalists usually are quite similar to, if not identical with, the program of reformist nationalists, most notably the Congress of Racial Equality. CORE's embracement of Black capitalism was completed at its 1968 convention in Columbus, Ohio. The theme of that meeting was Black nationalism, CORE's philosophy for survival. But these seemingly militant words served as a cover for CORE's retreat into the arms of corporate capitalism. It was a curious convention in that all workshop resolutions, the product of 3 days of work by several hundred delegates, were tabled. To add to the confusion of an to add to the confusion, an open schism, which some said threatened to become violent, erupted between the national office and Coors Brooklyn. It's always fucking Brooklyn. Stop. Like, stop. It's always a fucking New Yorkers. You can't take us nowhere. Despite these gyrations, the convention
Yeah, you're
actually
right.
okay, that's the same thing.
Hmm.
The convention actually did not become known to many delegates until after the convention was over.
Oh
It was
no, baby, that's
that's
a
a
footnote.
footnote?
Hmm.
Damn, that's
That
a long
that
ass footnote.
okay.
Okay,
That's half the
goddamn.
thing.
If y'all can't see it, it's half the damn page. That's why I was like, wait, why is this small? All right. Despite these gyrations, the convention struggled along and finally reached an agreement on a unique nationalist program, a program which grew out of several years' thinking by Black nationalists within CORE. The leading spokesman for nationalism within CORE, Rob Innes, explained his program in a lengthy presentation to delegates. Innes first explained that Black Power is, quote, the methodology for the implementation of the goals of Black nationalism. Black nationalism, he said, is the philosophy of self determination of an oppressed people. He said that Blacks must seek liberation by any means necessary and pragmatic. He went on to differentiate between segregation, integration, and nationalist separation. A necessary condition of segregation is racial separation, but this is not sufficient to define and understand segregation. Equating too simply Equating the two simply confuses and obscures the underlying economic realities. For segregation also means that even in all Black communities, control over public institutions, schools, welfare, police, etc., private business, and the flow of goods and services is exercised overwhelmingly by whites, not Blacks. Thus, while whites and Blacks are physically separated under segregation, whites are able to control and manipulate Blacks to the advantage of the former. In terms of control, racial integration is no better, Innes contended. Even in a racially integrated or heterogeneous society, whites will continue to hold economic power and exercise control over integrated Blacks. The Blacks, not being owners, managers, or administrators of any major institutions, would have no choice but to continue to yield to this white control. Hence, for Innes, the determining factor in the race issue hinges on the question who exercises effective institutional control over Black people. On this score, segregation and integration must be counted failures because neither alters basic power relations from within the society.
Mm.
The only acceptable.
I can go and take it from here.
Mhm.
Thank you. The only acceptable solution, Innes argued, is the nationalist solution. By this, he meant institutional and geographic separation of natural sociological units and redefinition of these as a political units. Mere institutional decentralization is not sufficient because real power would still rest in the white hands. Enos instead called for parallel institutional systems, completely separate and different. Parallel structures are necessary to effectively counteract the institutional racism which facilitates the exploitation and oppression of Black people. It is not the individual racist who is not dangerous to Black people, Innes stated. Rather, it is racism which, over hundreds of years, has become enshrined in American institutions and now poses the gravest threat to the existence of Black people. Ennis believes that predatory and unreformed capitalism is incapable of rooting out and destroying this institutional racism. Therefore, he concluded only through complete institutional separation can Black people defend themselves against the debilitating effects of racism. Here's my thing with that. Whenever I hear people describe capitalism as, oh, like the unregulated or capitalism run amok, no, it's capitalism, period. Like there's no version of capitalism in which we can be free under it. There's no version of capitalism that guarantees 100% housing. There's no version of capitalism that guarantees that everyone will have access to food. that everyone will be allowed to go to school and study whatever the fuck they want. No, it can't, because part of capitalism is maintaining hierarchy. It's hoarding wealth up so only a few can get it, and the few can continue to consume while more and more are exploited. There's no such thing as like we're all going to be equal under capitalism. So there's no version of it. There's no kind of adjective you can put in front of it to make it a better way of capitalism. It's fuck that shit needs to be dismantled. That shit frustrates me, but that also lets me know like the political position of a person when they describe shit like that. Because what I'm getting from what we read of Ennis is basically he's saying, or he's proposing, not to challenge the system, but to just create a separate one, and hopefully they'll leave us alone. That is not debate, but a conversation I have with New Africans a lot. Is the thing about being just separate, as though America will allow that. We'll just be like, okay, y'all just gonna do your own thing in the South, well, we're good. No, I can only align with a strategy that means we confront the state. Like it has to be dismantled. I don't want some corner of the world where we're just safe and just kept in the corner, and that white supremacy and capitalism and exploitation still exists, because it will come for us eventually, no matter where we hide. It takes and consumes land all the time. So to me, just a real strategy, it has to be to directly face the beast, not just separate and just create something different and allow it to keep consuming. That doesn't make any sense to me. But yo, that's me. Ennis rightly attacks institutional racism as a prime enemy of Black liberation. But in the reasoning that leads him to this point, there is confusion about the relationship between capitalism and racism. Let me just shut up and read. Indeed, one could get the impression from Ennis that there is no intrinsic connection between the two, and it is simply accidental that they happen to coexist in the United States. Oh, the historic growth of American racism out of capitalist-inspired slavery and the subsequent institutionalization of this racism are simply ignored. Ennis treats capitalism and racism as givens, which require no further probing in themselves. Exactly. That's, man, all right. See what happens when you pay attention? With this much said by way of introduction, Ennis then elaborates his program, termed the economic theory of nationhood. In Core's new constitution, it calls for the complete takeover by Blacks of all economic, political, and social institutions in Black communities for the purpose of fostering the economic development of these communities. In his caution, the delegates that discussing Black economic development is tricky business since much depends on who is talking. For example, by economic development, in quotes, the government means opening up more jobs. This is an unacceptable palliative, and it said two men such as Senator Jacob Javits and the late Senator Robert Kennedy. He continued, Black economic development means bringing white corporations into the ghettos to create jobs. This also is unacceptable. A modern nation, Ennis asserts, becomes viable through the creation of capital instruments. We can't make money through jobs. You make money through owning capital instruments, land, and other properties. How are these capital instruments to be secured? Ennis answered by suggesting that the way to economic development lay in foraying into the political arena in an effort to gain control of key institutions such as schools. My next comment has nothing to do with what we just read, but I just read the word foray, and I just thought, what happened to the Forex niggas? Where are they now? Like, that was just a random thought. I'm
I'm
sorry.
fucking dead. Please.
Are they all millionaires? Did I miss it? Were they right all along? I'm sorry, I played too much. He attacked school decentralized plans, such as the ones developed recently in New York City, on the grounds that they do not provide for any real transfer of power to the local level. He charged that the New York plan merely arranged for a redistribution of power between the Board of Education and the mayor, with the teachers union trying to pick up some of the crumbs. It is necessary for Blacks to take full control of the schools in their communities, he maintained. Then, one of the first economic development programs could be supplying goods and services to school in our areas by setting up Black companies. He explained that such companies could later diversify and thereby expand and strengthen an independent economic base in Black communities. Thus, political action, taking control of the Black schools, becomes a means for building Black capitalism. And his strategy was unwittingly based on the assumption that America political democracy actually works the way it is described in school textbooks. Exactly.
Ow.
Exactly. He's coming from a perspective like, y'all, we just got to work hard. That's what it is. We haven't tried this before. That's why. Like, it's not that that the system of capitalism is inherently racist and exploitative. No, that's not it. It's because if we would just put black people in charge, it would actually be better and just do the same thing and somehow we would get a different result. What the fuck? Exactly. It's just, again, revolutionary imagination. We need to develop and foster that because it's so necessary in order to develop a strategy of liberation.
You want me to pick up?
Oh, please. Thank you.
Um, that is that political power is based upon the will of a majority of the people in a given geographic area. If this were the case, then there might be hope for instituting black capitalism along the lines suggested by Innes. But political power in America is dependent upon who controls valued resources and critical institutions, not vice versa. And those who have this power cannot be voted out of their positions by the public at large because the base of their power lies outside the formal political sphere. I need to get that tatted because niggas don't get it. You do not vote for the people who have power in this country. You just don't. You don't vote for them. Their base of power lies in the corporations and the largely public institutions, which are interdependent, but largely removed from the sway of public pressure. I would call that an oligarchy. So the thing
Okay.
that we learn about democracy, we don't live in a democracy, we live in an oligarchy. But that's my personal opinion. That's not the book. Innes was not altogether aware of the problems posed by the gap between myth and reality of the political democracy and political power in this country. He told the delegates that his program would necessarily require a new contract between the blacks and whites. Arguing that the U.S. Constitution is outdated, he called for a new political arrangement which would define black communities as political units and secure the ability to reallocate the wealth within our system. He contended that blacks must be recognized as a special interest group for which appropriate provisions must be made in a new social contract. Don't that sound like these FBA or the Negro
Yes.
niggas?
Recycling the same shit. Exactly.
Yo, the
Don't call
same
us black, call
strategy.
us Negro. And it's like, wait, what? You're
It's
going backwards and the shit don't matter. You're still oppressed.
it literally is like just, and it's unfortunate that the academy gatekeeps a lot of our history, or like just even the tools to be able to read good. Like niggas, people are reading on a sixth grade level. If you're reading on a sixth grade level, how are you reading the history that what you think is the key to your freedom? They already tried that.
Hmm.
Like it's unfortunate and annoying.
Oh, but real quick, baby, the part where you read about, the voting and how it's actually controlled by corporate interests and how you accurately describe that as an oligarchy. That's why also you need to understand these things. And it's good that we read and we work through these, like, holding political education spaces. It's because you got to understand too, the strategy of, oh, we just need to pull our money together and put it behind a politician does not work against corporations worth billions. Like, why would you siphon already the little resource we have and say, no, we're not going to put it into like of a co-op for like a food source or helping, black farmers say their no, we're not going to do none of that. That can actually help us, in any kind of food sovereignty or anyway into community programs. We're going to give it to a politician and hope they listen to us. That makes no sense. Like stop investing in a system that is already invested in your demise. It's so counter-revolutionary. But continue to cook, baby. You're doing good. You're doing great, actually.
um I'm just going to keep reading. This, of course, was very close to Cruz's demand for ethnic democracy in the United States. But where Cruz saw ethnic democracy in cultural terms, Inez is a political animal who approaches the matter as a political problem. Since Black people are becoming the largest minority, if not outright majorities, in increasing numbers of American cities, any new social contract to be acceptable to Blacks must redefine the structure of cities so as to grant political autonomy to the Black communities. Such an arrangement, Inez said, would create a nation of dispersed city states, a series of islands with land separating us. The United States would therefore become a multinational federation. Now, this shit's gonna have y'all dead. He says, well, why will white America agree to this plan? Inez answered flatly, we have the ability to withdraw a sacred commodity from America, peace and tranquility. Actually, white America is not a monolith, and it is possible to isolate the petty urban barons who control the ghettos from other white interest groups, including the national ruling structure, by graphically demonstrating that these urban managers are no longer controlling and operating their cities efficiently. By appealing
Mm.
to the self interest and desire for peace of various elements of white population, he concluded. It is possible to get a chance of management and have central cities turned over to Black control. In this respect, it will be seen Inez's thinking closely parallels that of a more sophisticated members of the white power structure.
And what have we seen happen with that?
Literally.
Like, you have black people, you shit, who the mayor of fucking New York, that motherfucking coon ass nigga, like I mean, just a whole police state, just a whole fucking just tap dancing, counter revolutionary, just terrible person, man. And I'm saying, but that happens all the time because, yeah, you can be put in charge, or like he's saying, basically replace the white overseers with black overseers. It's still a plantation, so you still have the same result.
And he's literally saying they're going to do that so that way when it goes wrong they can appeal to people and say, look, if they're not handling these cities correctly, we need to take it over. So essentially it's just like a foregone conclusion already that those things are going to fail, and they know that, and they literally want to put those black people in power so that they can fail, so they can say, look, we try to let y'all niggas have some freedom, but look what y'all did with it. Like, you
And
know.
that's why it's so important to not allow the black bourgeois to lead any kind of movements. And man, people are going to be like, but what? No, because this is what you have to mitigate. This is what you're trying to avoid, but constantly happens. Like they cannot be in charge of any revolution. It can't be no mouthpiece, like none of that. Just tell them to use their resources to give it to us so that, we can do what we need to do as the proletariat. But no, the bourgeois, the black bourgeois, any bourgeois class does not need to be in charge of no revolution.
Pen, do you want to stop here? So, because it's like been an hour.
Okay. So we're what, in the middle? Do you want to finish the page and we can start off on 189?
Yes. I'll
Cool.
finish at like right before the page ends in that little paragraph. Needless to say, it is highly unlikely that a rearrangement will come about, and when everything is examined, the prospects for the urban black masses successfully to employ some kind of ethnic group model of advancement are at best dim. Social critics Francis Fox Piven and Richard A. Cloward, writing in the March 30th, 1968 issue of New Republic, concluded that local government has been greatly weakened since the heyday of the ethnic urban machine. Localities now collect a mere 7% of tax revenues, while the federal government collects two-thirds. This fiscal weakness underlies the great vulnerability of local government to national centralized power. The national government is using its multitude of existing programs for localities to form a new system of metropolitan wide bureaucracies. This new level of government will impose federal policies on localities and in the course of channeling grants in aid to them. This metropolitanism will also serve to cushion the impact of urban black voting majorities on American politics and political priorities.
Appreciate you.
Period. Shaquille, we saw you come up here. What's up?
Nah, I was going.
How you
I'm
feeling?
I'm chilling. How y'all feeling?
Good.
I was going back to a point you was making before with just replacing some white shit with some black shit, more or less. You've seen that in recent times just with the Obama administration. You have this image that's there, and it's just doing all of the things. And, as a matter of fact, it heightened it, if anything. And we were talking about this yesterday, or I'm not yesterday, the day before, to an extent. And
Mm-hmm.
it
No, for
and
real.
even talking, invoking like Fred Hampton when he's saying, "Don't we're not going to replace white capitalism with black capitalism." It makes zero sense to just all you're doing is substituting the player. You're not changing the game.
Right. And if the power is still in the hands of crackers, like all you are doing is auditioning to become black overseers. And again, so it's not freedom and it's not liberation to call it anything other than what it is. Assimilation
It's,
is
it's
yeah.
just the optics of it. As long as we see some shit, even kind of talking about Kwame Ture since they decided to try to throw dirt on his name in this particular book. Black visibility is not representation, and people get that shit conflated all the time. Alongside like the power structure and shit like that. Like we have to demolish it and eliminate everything that was there. All the tenets of it have to be gone.
Exactly. And create alternatives and see those as legitimate and not wait for an oppressor to deem it legitimate. Like this whole Oscars is so white, the whole way in which we consume media and create media and the goal of it to present it to a capitalist mainstream system. And if they accept it, then it's valid. Then you're an artist. We got to dispel that shit too. And that starts with us in the community. Like I was talking earlier about, like, what if we engage in music totally differently? Like, what if we look at entertainment in totally different terms? Like, what if we no longer do TV shows at Netflix? Instead, we go out to the corner and look at impromptu plays that the playwright down the street made. Like, again, we can name what the culture is and how it can be revolutionary. It does not need to be like just a black version of white, you know, mediocrity,
Yeah,
honestly.
because you know, once it's co-opted, they're gonna fuck it up anyway. Look at what happened between, I don't know how old everybody is. I'll go back to it, but Living Single in France, for example, that's robbery of black shit, so to speak, as far as that particular aspect of it is concerned. And then they've taken it and turned it into some whole otherness.
No, for real.
You know,
And I mean, oh, my bad. Go
even
ahead.
even with the music, you know, 50th anniversary of hip hop, to think about how it started. How was the message from inner city kids in the streets in poverty? Rappers used to wear shit that the everyday worker could afford, so there was relatability there. Nobody in this chat right now, at least I don't think so, is going out and purchasing a $2,000 T-shirt. So it went away from
That was
being
the price of eggs.
it,
Shit.
it went from being something that was organic and being something that was grassroots to being something that became material to something that became part of this monopoly.
And that's the whole purpose of it, right? To be able to indoctrinate us into it. That's why too, like, to look at it and say, okay, if we just have black overseers, and like in the book, each of them stated, like, from right to Ennis, talking about, okay, so when something does happen and the conditions get so bad that they begin to uprise, having black overseers is more beneficial because we can quell that. We can act as wet blankets and they'll listen to us because we're black and we use that militant language. But then again, then you have to ask yourself, if they're saying that this is their function, then who does that really serve? And again, they're already saying that it's inevitable that there would be other riots, even under blacks managing the ghettos, right? And the urban areas. They know that it will still be the same. They're literally sitting up there applying for assimilation into an oppressive system. And they're saying, like, we could actually make it better with the oppressed being the overseers. That is so wild. But again, we need to understand that because oftentimes we love the person in the suit or the person who's like wearing certain clothes and has their hair fried, dyed, and laid to the side. And if they use any kind of one little, militant line, talking point, all of a sudden we're like, you know what? They're for us. And I'm like, how? They're literally tap dancing with fucking Hillary Clinton, a whole imperialist warmongering individual, and the rest of them. But
Look
yeah,
at
uh,
the
Oh my
Obama
God.
shit again, right? And Obama co-signed the current regime that's in there now, and look at what the fuck's happening. You understand what I'm saying?
right.
Or even just Obama being in office, you got Mike Gardner. I mean Eric Gardner. You got Mike Brown. You got Trayvon Martin. All of this shit happened under him. So to think that we're going to get somebody in there, or that people are going to get somebody in there without analyzing the politics, is an exercise in futility.
And we need revolutionary imagination. We need to think outside of these things like they don't fucking work. And we need to do more than think. We need to put theory into action because again, if we're telling like young people that this is your job to pick up where we left off, we got to give them somewhere to pick up from. And it can't be the same shit or even regressing backwards. We need to move the needle forward. And therefore where they pick up off, they can make it a little closer to that finish line of liberation that we're all trying to get to. Right now, we're not leaving them anything to where I'm not surprised that I'm seeing even among youth conversations, they're coming to the very same conclusions that we have already deemed do not work. But it's because what do we leave them to work with?
I really like this particular section just because it was just like kind of shotgun argumentation against the usual suspects of like anti-blackness. Like when niggas is trying to give solutions that already been given, it's just like nigga this he just comes at it like back to back. So like the cultural nationalism, boom, the political nationalism, boom, like there's no wiggle room in what we need to do in terms of revolution and how that's also a violent affair. I think it's so potent even in the text when he was talking about what are these people that empower, what was Inez leveraging to the white power structure, how was he going to get them to make all those concessions. What did he say? He said he's going to threaten them with violence. So everybody knows what is going on here. It's just a matter of, are we going to acknowledge that the only thing that's going to move white supremacy off our neck is us actually moving it? And it's like everyone is giving us solutions around the fact that we all know what the most effective option is, because that's what they chose. That's how white people became free from their own oppressors. They know that's the only strategy, because they wasn't sitting there trying to, petition and vote out the Queen of England, nigga. No, they rebelled and killed niggas. Like, that's what you have to do. You have to rebel. So I just find it so interesting that even in the text, they're like, yeah, we're leveraging revolutionary energy and potential for our solutions. And that's going to be like what we're bargaining over, the quote unquote ability to keep the peace.
But you know what, too? You brought up Ophase and the 1776 war. So there's a good book by Gerald Horne that's called The Counter Revolution of 1776. Y'all, we're going to have to do a space on that because that shit hits. Like, it's really good. You just jogged my memory about it. But yeah, he names it a counter revolution. And he goes through and why, it wasn't really revolutionary. And it's interesting shit that we should really like work through and dissect. But go ahead, Shaquille.
I think concession and I, through all the reading that I've done and just looking at different books, concession is the biggest problem because once there's a little bit of a concession, people think it's progress automatically, and that's not necessarily the case. And we see it even with recently, right? Like, look at the aftermath of George Floyd. It's like, all right, they put Black Lives Matter in the streets. They took down these. All of this shit is symbolic. None of it substantive. None of it meant to uh, progress or move forward. But it's more for containment, where it's like, all right, well, we give you a little concession, and keep shit exactly as it is.
Exactly. And look how many people created careers out of that. Like even celebrities were tapping in to say BLM when they saw that it would get them trending, and now people are like streaming their music more or going to see a movie that they're in. Like people used it for social capital a lot. I mean, people wore a blue vest to every protest. Why? Because they wanted to create a trademark so they would be noticed and now put on Time magazine. Wild shit like that. Like who thinks like, oh, I'm seeing black people being lynched. You know what I'm gonna do? But that is the system that we're under, and that's how people choose to react. But we have to understand these things and also cut that out like a fucking tumor, because what ends up happening is, again, they spell out our righteous anger and they sell it for upward mobility. But what ends up happening is that they siphon off that energy and people are left exhausted and depleted. Then they get to 30, they're like, the revolution hasn't happened, so you know what, let me just assimilate it and make it. And that it continues to happen in that way. And we normalize it to the point where you'll meet someone who's older, who is maybe not no longer active, but has made a career for themselves. And they'll be like, well, back in my day, I did this. And you can't critique them. They did such and such in 2019. And it's like, so what? We're still not free. So the work
It's race
continues.
hustling.
And so there we go. It's hustling, and it's like it's weakness and it's cowardice. And because when they use that term race hustling, I often hear it from crackers who try to say anytime anyone brings up race, they call it race hustling. But my thing is, it's pandering. It's capitulation to a power. It's flirting with fascism. Like you're selling your own people out. You're basically a modern day slave trader. That's what it is. Like they even say it in the book. Like we're going to leverage the righteous anger of the oppressed to pressure the white establishment to do what we want them to do, to give us, the black middle class, concessions. That was literally the game plan. That is being a modern day slave trader, because they never talk about actually getting their people free. They're just saying like, hey, if we become the black managers, things might not be as oppressive. But then actually they will be, because we need to be able to tap into y'all's energy, y'all righteous anger whenever I need to move up. When inevitably the cost of living goes up, I'm going to need to tap into y'all again and use y'all for upper mobility. It's sick shit.
It's a seat at the table kind of ideology that they keep, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. If you're not trying to overthrow the system, you're not really doing shit. All of this seat at the table, nobody's going nowhere with it. I think that I'm from New York too, Queens, and I look at it like, when Hove did the opening for the Barclays Center, we're not thinking about how many people got displaced and all of that just for them to put up a goddamn stadium.
Right. And got niggas passing up $500,000 to eat a Twinkie in an egg roll with Jay-Z. It don't even make sense, the indoctrination and propaganda they got us all going through to be next to these idols that they put in front of us to worship. But again, it's a lack of revolutionary imagination, because then what does dismantling look like? Right? When we go further with these questions, with these thoughts, and expand on them. All right, so then what does liberation look like? What does that mean? And see, that's the conversations we got to start having, because in order to, we have to stretch beyond like what we're currently used to thinking. Because if we agree that we live under a white supremacist system, that we're constantly being indoctrinated, well, then even our ability to dream of liberation is being held hostage as well. So part of the revolutionary process is to break through those chains and expand our thinking. Like I oftentimes ask myself, what happens if I go outside right now to go check the mail and I see motherfuckers throwing grenades and running with all kind of automatic weapons, and someone comes to me and like, hey, sis, it's time, it's going down. How would I react? And a lot of us need to ask that, because as we've seen with the very public genocide of Palestine, we see what a lot of people would choose if they saw a revolution happening in front of their front door. They would choose to stay. They would choose to stay. So then what do we do about that? How do we prepare for that, knowing that that's an inevitability? We got to talk to each other. We got to create community. We got to understand and paint the picture that liberation is worth fighting for, not staying within the system, not staying tied to something that's literally sucking the soul out of you and everyone that comes from you. So yeah. Baby, I don't know if you wanted anything to add. If not, I can go ahead and close the space.
Um, no, I think it was a really good section. Super grateful that everyone pulled up today. We know like it's Friday. It's a lot of that happened this week. Um, I hope that y'all hearts are okay. I know they're probably not, but they could be not okay. We could be all not okay together. I feel like part of the function of these spaces, at least for me, is to be educating myself amongst folks who are just fed up. A lot of times there's not even enough to say. Like there's not even the words to say about like what the fuck we're experiencing right now. So yeah, just to close out, I just want to thank y'all for coming, sharing space with us, even if you know you can't speak. Shout out to Shaquille for, you know, your thoughts are always so dope. I love hearing you speak. Shout out to you for coming up. Shout out for everyone listening. And we'll see y'all soon. And I just want y'all to take care of yourselves, because y'all are not alone. We are all in this shit together, for real, for real. So just sending mad love to y'all.
Thank you for that. And like always, y'all, let's get free. Oh, also too, so the space has been acting up. Like the ones that I sent out, you'll see it says, I guess, canceled or over. So yeah, if y'all could like hit the notifications, that way you'll get a notification too. But I will try to keep up with the inboxes. But with apartheid Clyde taking over and controlling the app, the shit's janky. So sometimes the spaces don't work. So you can also look for that purple light around either pin or choose his account profile, and you'll know the space is open too. So with that, we'll end. And always, let's get free. In the Jumbotron, there's a tweet real quick from that I just think perfectly like summarize what we've been reading so far in this chapter. And he says, the Black bourgeois misleadership class is so repugnant, servile, and plain dangerous. The mollifying effect they have on Black politics, the systemic manner in which they're installed, and the Trojan horse role they play for racial capitalism, gross. And what he's talking about is the New York mayor, Adams guy. So if y'all would take a look at that, share it if y'all feel like it. But yeah, so then I'll go ahead and end the space with that.